And now I'm going to turn over to Ron Lynch. Thank you, Ron.
Good morning, Richmond family. Happy Sabbath.
Good morning.
Happy Sabbath.
Good morning.
Happy Sabbath, Ron and Karen.
It's almost like coming home, you know. Karen's trying waving in there. Well, I've only got just a few minutes. Darcy said you got to move through, so I'm going to move through pretty quick. I'm just going to do a health nugget here, but you know, I believe that there's going to be a big blessing in this morning for your church. So I'm going to start by sharing screen here, and give me just a second to pull this up. All right. Can you see that? Can you see it all right there? Is everything good? Okay.
Yes.
So
That's good.
today I'm going to talk about the subject of walking. Now, walking is in the health reform of exercise. And exercise is one of the laws of health that we know of that are very beneficial to us. But when we talk about walking, what I'd like to specifically talk about this morning is walking as a way of recovering. And now this morning, we're a part of this men's ministry Sabbath. And so, men, I'd like for you to take a special look at this and maybe think about this as some way that you might be able to use walking as an entering wedge in your ministry, okay? You know, the problem with exercise and walking is that many of us often find that we feel like we're just too busy to actually accomplish this. But did you know that when you are exercising, that you actually can incorporate 5 of the 8 laws of health? These 5 are, and just go over them very briefly, would be air and sunshine. And we can also get, of course, our exercise, and then we can obviously get rest in our minds. We can kind of put our trust in God. And so we can do these types of things while we're exercising. But the thing is that many people say, well, you know, I'm busy, you know, and I can't do this. Well, like this little cartoon says, is it better to be alive 24 hours a day, or is it better to not try to do an hour of exercise? Now, you may say, well, Ron, that's kind of drastic. Is it really this crucial? Is it this important? Well, I will tell you, yes, it is. Now, here at Wildwood, we do what we call a digestive walk. And many of you may do that as well. When you're at home, you may go for a walk after you eat. If you don't, I would like to encourage you to maybe to consider doing this. And I'm going to give you some reasons why that you would want to do a digestive walk. What we find is that in the book Ministry of Healing, page 240, Mrs. White tells us that when we do walking after we eat, what we find is that we get aid for our digestion. Now, she's very specific in this, and what she says is that we should take a short walk. And she says we shouldn't do exercise or walking that is vigorous after we eat, because she says it can actually do harm to your body. But the thing is that we kind of know these things, but the science actually back this up. Well, according to Dr. Loretta DiPietro, which is a professor of exercise at Georgetown University, George Washington University, that she has done these exact same studies. And what she has come up with is the exact same thing, that when we walk after we eat, that it helps the digestive process. But she also found, just like in the spirit of prophecy, that more isn't necessarily better. And in fact, it can actually cause a problem for when we walk. But this is where this takes an interesting turn to me, because as I was studying this, I was trying to think in my mind, well, what is it? What about this digestive walk makes this so unique? What really turns this thing on? Well, you see down here in this last paragraph on this slide that in 2016 that there was a study done, and what it discovered was that people with type 2 diabetes was getting a huge benefit from walking after they ate. Now, I thought to myself, well, how does this work? Well, because of COVID, last year, Karen and I weren't out, but the year before that, we met this Dr. Errol Bryce, and Dr. Bryce is from the Texas Conference. And what Dr. Bryce discovered was this thing called GLUT4. Now, GLUT4 stands for glucose transporter number 4. Now, there are about 12 glucose transporters. Now, I'm going to say, if this intrigues you as much as it does me, I think it would be good for you to jot this down, because this is something that's super amazing, and that you're going to find that when you have friends and loved ones who are suffering from diabetes, this is a pretty interesting study. So what happens with GLUT4? Well, GLUT4, this hormone, is actually activated when we start to exercise. So in other words, it's kind of dormant inside the cells until we exercise. I put together this diagram of how the system works after we eat. And what happens is that you can see that we have a bloodstream here, and that the foods that we eat turn to glucose, and then the glucose is supposed to meet up with the insulin and then find its way to an insulin receptor. And then in that insulin receptor is supposed to find its way inside the cell. And inside the cell is where this GLUT4, or this transporter, is sitting. And what its job is to either use this glucose for either energy or to store it for a later time. Well, the problem is when you have type 2 diabetes, is that your glucose and your insulin aren't pairing up properly in order to get inside the cell. There's some type of covering or something that's holding this cell from getting it. So our glucose stays into our bloodstream, which is why we have a high blood sugar. So what happens with the GLUT4 when you exercise is that it actually comes up out of the cell into the bloodstream. And it will actually take the glucose directly from the bloodstream, even without the use of insulin. Do you understand the importance of what I'm telling you here? This is something that when I heard this, I was like, it blew me away. You see, God's actually given us a second chance. And you see, when this happens, what it does, it's going to help stabilize those high blood sugar spikes and to help curb those low blood sugar dips you see. So walking after you eat not only is good for the digestion, but is also extremely prominent in helping with type 2 diabetes. Now, as you guys know, where we work at, where Robert's at and where we're at, that we come across a lot of people with type 2 diabetes. And I was trying to find out in my mind the science. Why is it that folks are recovering after 10 or 11 days that come to our place and have no, when they leave, having no problems with their diabetes? This is a very integral part of that program. So I just thought I would share that with you this morning. There's a lot more in detail with it. You guys may have some questions. If you do, ask Karen and I. We'll be happy to share that at another time when we're not involved directly here and we're moving to another program after. Now, I'd like to just mention, since we talked about men's ministry, this little book right here called Light Up Your Life. And this little book right here is a book that we put out. This is a book that can actually help you to take, and I've actually put this here to exercise. I don't know if you can see it or not. This book can help you to actually take and become like a life coach with someone who's struggling. So if you know someone who's struggling with diabetes, This is a tool, if you will, that you can as men take and share with people and go out actually on a walk with them and help them on their road to recovery from disease. And in closing this morning, I'd like to ask you to commit. Karen and I made a commitment this year to say we are going to practice more walking after we eat. And again, as men, we don't spend as much time maybe as we should with our wives. This is a time that Karen and I have set apart. Now, what I suggested to Karen, I didn't tell. I don't tell Karen. I suggested to Karen. I see Victoria smiling there. when I suggested to Karen, I said, listen, we could do this, but we should incorporate this just already into our schedule when we do a meal. So when we're preparing, we'll say, all right, it's going to take this long to prepare, this much to eat, this much time to clean up. Now we are adding into that equation a walk. And for us, I mean, obviously we're on the road a lot. So what we try to do is to minimize that. Well, I shouldn't say minimize it. Our goal is to do that about 70% of the time. So, you know, of course, we'd like to build to 100% of the time, but that's where we're at. So I just would like to challenge you as I'm closing here to take your wife, go for a good walk after you eat, and work your way to better health. And we'll conclude with that.